Hi, everyone. Good evening and welcome to another edition of our cybersecurity mentoring group. I believe that you've had a good weekend or a good work week, and thank you for joining us today. Cybersecurity mentoring group, in case you are joining us for the first time, is a platform where we share, we learn, and we connect with professionals. And today, as we'll do every 2 Saturdays in a month, we come together and share some topic that we think everyone can learn from and do something about when they resume the next day at work or the next work day. Okay, I won't take much of your time in the introduction. I think our facilitator is ready, but I just want to go through our BAU. So I was going through some of the activity that happened in September, and I came across this event. It's a cyber incident that affected, I think it's the Land Rover, Jaguar Land Rover. And I went to their website, so you can see the link below, listing the releases that possibly the CEO or the media team must have put out to let people know of what happened to the organization. And usually this is not very, very palatable for cybersecurity professionals because you are not sure of what has happened and you are probably not also sure about your job. So, but like they say, cyber incidents is not something that you can really punish people for, because as long as you are available on the cyberspace, you will have a taste of what the bad guys will do. So this is an incident that has impacted Land Rover, and it has also shut down their business. And if you go through when they discovered the event, I think it was September 1st that it got into the news, but information is that it had happened in August. It was September 1st that they detected that there's something wrong with their system. And then they took action to shut the system down. And then they weren't sure whether there's some kind of exfiltration of data, but eventually, I think 4 days after, they came back and said something has happened, and we think that some data have been carted away. And this is the 16th, the last update, and I think 24th, you probably on Wednesday next week, you will see more information. They are getting support from cybersecurity experts. I saw one from the National Cybersecurity Council, NCSC, who is lending support to the organization. So when things like this happen, they want to make sure that they gather every support that they can get. I also looked at, so the next slide, kind of, this is, again, this is, I just used AI to summarize what has happened. And AI said that there's a group that is involved, scattered lab source hunters. I went to the MITRE website, the attack website, to look for scattered lab source hunters. The last update I have about them, okay, I didn't see scattered laptops. I saw scattered, and I saw lab source differently. And the last update about lab source was April 2025. So maybe this has not been updated, or they weren't the one that um, um, did this. But one thing I've read about them is that they have exploited user accounts to compromise organizations. And if you go through the timeline, this is AI that has summarized it. It mentioned that what led to the attack was probably a phishing campaign. So that's a voice phishing, a social engineering that has happened through a voice call, maybe a call from someone that they thought can be trusted. And that led to leveraging data from prior breaches on third-party CRM and database vendor to get access. And I'm happy that today we're looking at third-party. And according to, again, I can't, again, because we don't have a lot of information out there. So, but this is information that AI was able to gather from different sources. And it says there's an element of third-party compromise involved. What has happened to Land Rover now? There's a compromise of, there's exfiltration of data. Secondly, their production has been paused in factories across the UK, Slovakia, India, and Brazil. And according to estimates, 33,000 staff and risk of over 100,000 supply chain jobs. By Wednesday, according to the release, they will then know what next to do. And there's a loss of about 50, I think that's 50 million weekly that is happening to the organization. So it's a very tough time for this organization right now, because you have to take in your system offline just to limit that attack. And when you bring it on, doesn't mean that if these people are in the system, they won't still do what they want to do. It was a tough time for them. They are keeping the customers aware. They are keeping the regulators also aware, because in the West, these things are basic. You must do it. Remember, I said that they probably detected on the first, they came to the press or published something about it on the second, and they've been updating almost on a weekly basis, which is to keep people who probably have trusted them with their data, to let them know that this is what they are taking, actions they are taking. So that's the top, I think that's the top cybersecurity incident I found in September. There are many, but this is just the one I want to highlight. And I'm happy that it mentioned something about third party, and we're talking about third party today. Moving on, we're working on this. Right now we meet on a weekly basis with the team that have volunteered. Hopefully we'll be able to wrap up data collection this month, and then work through analysis and then formatting of the data in a way that we can all make sense of when it is published. Today will be our 19th edition for the year. And if you are joining us for the first time, on the top right-hand side, you will see the YouTube channel where you can go look at some of the activities that we are, the topics we have covered. And I must say, because if you look at the people that we have invited so far, you will see that we have had a lot of male or men in our list. It is not an intentional selection. So I am actually right now looking for someone to invite, especially a woman. And so if you have anyone that you think is open to this type of conversation, I would like to have that person for next edition, which is October 1st or 4th. Yeah, October. So please, if you have anyone, I have secured one, but that one is in November. But I need another woman to give us some balance. So the selection is not intentional. It is just because the field is getting to maybe open, or women, ladies are now looking into that field. All right. Let's get into the game of today. First, thanks to Toluwani for accepting our invitation. I reach out to people as much as possible. I have reached out to, even right now, I've reached out to people for the rest of the year. Some people are probably busy, they can't accept our invitation. But for those that decide to put some things aside and give us their attention, we are sincerely grateful. And thank you for Toluwani for honoring our invitation to share thoughts on this topic. And also, after the presentation, Toluwani will also be sharing his journey in cyber, and as many questions as you have concerning navigating the cyber security profession, we'll be willing to shed more light in. All right, Toluwani, you can take over the screen now and share your screen. I will go off camera so that you can take the floor. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. It's evening at my side. Good evening, everybody. It's nice to join these conversations, and I sincerely appreciate the cybersecurity mentoring group for having me come in to share the little I have from my experiences. And I trust this is going to be a dialogue, not a monologue, really. So I believe a lot of experience will be shared, and at the end of the session, each of us will have something valuable, a very good takeaway that we can implement in our workplaces. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so yeah, Michael, please confirm if you can see
Yes,
my
I
screen.
can.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, so today we'll be having conversations around managing third-party risk. We're looking at some key concepts, principles for IT security professional, and mostly what I'll be sharing will be based from experience working in IT audit, IT risk, IT security, and also cyber security consulting. Yeah, so third party risk management. Why does it matter? Why is it something we have to spend about 40 minutes of our Saturday talking about? Currently, the Premier League is on, and I'm sure most of the people around here are interested, should be interested in watching the game that is on now. But then we have decided to sacrifice this time to talk about third party risk management. So that means it must be something really important, something worth talking about. So I'll give a brief introduction. When I started my career, I was privileged to start my career in banking. And then in Nigerian banks, third party was not a big thing in the sense that for most banks, you find out they have their own data center where they have their servers running, they manage the cooling, they manage the heating, they manage the servers, most of the applications the banks needed were being built and managed in-house. But as technology began to grow, especially with the advent of cloud computing, we began to have people who specialize in providing specific services for organizations, banks, manufacturing, and for majority of the industry. And it doesn't make sense anymore for an organization to provide all the services they need to service their customers themselves. So you find now that most organizations are running on the cloud. Most organizations, especially startups, do not have a physical data center. They run either in Amazon Cloud, Azure Cloud, GCP. A lot of cloud providers are out there. For those, even for those who are not in the major clouds we know, they are running in some data center where they have some kind of agreement where they just put their servers in there. The data center owners run the physical security, the networking, and the rest for them. So really, third party is becoming a thing now because every organization cannot provide everything they need to serve their customers. And it's becoming complex because most enterprises depend on a complex ecosystem. So, I mean, I know it will make sense for a company to have. So, as a company, you have different functions. You have HR functions. You have accounting function. You have IT. So you can't build your accounting software, you can't build your HR software, you can't build your supplier software for organizations that are into procurement. You can't build your procurement software. Definitely, there are people who are specialized in this, and it makes sense because organizations should focus on their core business activities and outsource the less core activities to people who are specialists in that. And as organization grows, we begin to depend more on vendors and third parties. And it's getting to a level where majority of the functions of the organization, even staffing as it is now, is even being outsourced. Software development for most organizations is being outsourced to third parties. So we are beginning to rely heavily on third parties. Previously, the idea was we used to separate it a lot. There was IT risk and there were third party risk. But the way things are going with the current trends, I think third party risk are even becoming more major risk than our internal IT because most of our critical functions are now being moved outside of the four walls of the organization. We have growing reliance on vendors. Then escalating cybersecurity threats. I mean, Michael just said one. And from current statistics, 1 out of every 3 breaches are being caused by third-party risk. Also, we are beginning to see that different regulations, so most of the industries we have now are being regulated, and most of the regulators, most of the frameworks we are having now, cybersecurity frameworks, are beginning to app on third-party risk management. They are beginning to bring out stringent guidelines for organizations, especially organizations that provide services that are tied to national security. Organizations in the financial industry, organizations that provide uh, electricity, organizations that service the government and the ministries, organizations that provide critical infrastructure such as internet backbone. There's beginning to be a lot of strict and stringent regulations for them to manage third-party risk. So I think based on that, this is something plausible to spend our Saturday evening talking about. Now, just before we go into before we dive into third-party risk and the concept, I just basically just having a general overview about risk. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. A company is set to make profit, and the company has decided to take on some risk. That is why they're even set up at all, because it's a gamble. You set up an organization, you fund it, you staff it, and it's running. So there's a chance you meet your strategic objectives. There's a chance the strategic objectives will not be met. But then, looking at it from a cyber standpoint, looking at it from the risk of ICT risk, is the potential for any threat to exploit. A threat can be an actor, it might be an event, to exploit a weakness, which is known as vulnerability, that can cause harm to an organization. Also, there's a concept of probability, such that what is the chance of a threat actor exploiting a weakness or a vulnerability in our organization to cause harm to us? And if this happens by chance, if a threat actor is able to exploit a known vulnerability, what is the impact going to be on us and as an organization? And in cybersecurity, we look at this impact basically in 3 ways. How does it affect the confidentiality of information? How does it affect integrity, availability, and very importantly, how does it affect our reputation? Alluding to the Jaguar example, of course, they might have the financial muscle to mop up the financial loss, but there is a reputational risk, and that cannot be paid for. In fact, that cannot be quantified in financial terms, the reputational risk. And that is ultimately what we want to guide against. Even if we have money, we have insurance, we have strong financials as an organization. But then this reputation, it takes a long time to build a good reputation as a business, and this can be lost in seconds or minutes, and it takes a long time to build it as well. So in context, risk depends on assets, vulnerability, these threat actors, and of course, we are supposed to have controls to mitigate risk. So just looking at notable vendor third-party incident that has happened in the course of the year, earlier in the year and the last, this year and the last, in July 24, for those of us who could remember the CrowdStrike Falcon incident, where CrowdStrike was a cybersecurity tool. So again, organizations were trying to guide against cyber threats. They were trying to mitigate cyber vulnerabilities by implementing security tools. But what happened? There was a problem with the security tool. It caused Windows system to start restarting, blue screen of death, and the rest of them. And this disrupted airlines, banks, hospitals globally. This risk did not come as a result of internal weaknesses within the organization. They came as a result, or they happened as a result of third parties that provided service to them. And this is becoming a thing. And I think that is why it is worth conversing. There's a lot that happened in 2024. A lot again is beginning to happen. Risk from third parties in the year 2025. Now, how do we're talking about third party ICT, third party risk management. How does this start? How do we begin as an organization? As organization, as going concerns, how do we start off managing third-party risk within organizations? So third-party risk, like every other process within cybersecurity and IT management, is a top-bottom approach. So the first thing organizations are required to do is that third-party risk management should be driven by the top, should be driven from the board to management, to IT operations, to cybersecurity operations. Everybody within the organization has a role to play, but then it starts at the top, and it starts with a policy which is management's intent that establishes the foundation of how organization, number one, is going to assess risk, is going to mitigate, are going to assess risk, classify risk, mitigate risk, monitor risk that are arising from external vendors and service providers. And how do we do this? I mean, we can't reinvent the wheel. There are a lot of frameworks globally that a lot of frameworks we can use. There are a lot of internationally accepted frameworks that guides organizations on managing third-party risk management. So the first thing is to have a policy, and this policy should align with regulatory expectations and global best practices. For some industries that are heavily regulated, such as financial industries, industries that their services are tied to national security, there are regulatory expectations and their regulatory guidelines. So from the set-go, when we are formulating a third-party risk management policy, we should ensure that, number one, they align with global best practices, and also we should take our regulatory concerns, regulatory expectations into consideration. Also, in the third-party risk management policy, we should define roles. Who is responsible for what? Who does what? What are the roles within our third-party risk management efforts? And also, we should set escalation procedures in case something go wrong. So definitely, our third-party risk assessment should be tied to our incident response. I've been opportune to work as a cybersecurity consultant, and we get to see different scenarios. Because for third-party risk, as long as organizations choose to use third parties, it's a matter of when for an incident to happen. Because really, you can't. So really, the best practice and what people do is annually they review the cybersecurity the cybersecurity standing of their third parties and vendors. But the truth in practice is that you really can't say that every point in time they are following the rules and they are doing what they're supposed to do. So it's a matter of time before a risk that affects the organization crystallizes from a third party or a vendor. So our third party risk management policy should tie to our incidents response plan to say, in case anything happens from our third party, especially critical third parties, how do we mitigate this risk and how do we continue providing service at a minimum level to our customers? Also, we need to ensure that our risk management framework or our risk management policy is a risk-based approach. So organizations have different vendors. There might be vendors that provide printers, there might be vendors that provide ink, pen, but if a bank, you have your core banking application is sitting in a cloud. I mean, the criticality of the cloud provider who houses your core banking application cannot be the same as the vendor that provides or supply pens or food vendor to the IT team. So it should be a risk-based approach. And why are we doing this? We need to understand who are our critical vendors who support our critical service, and we need to pay really close attention to them because any risk that affects them directly affects us and impedes us to provide services to our customers, which directly affects our strategic objectives. Also, we should ensure that we have a third-party risk management life cycle. Risk management should be embedded into contracts. First, how do we source for third-party vendors? What are our security criteria? How do we onboard them? How do we monitor them? Then, of course, there is no relationship that lasts forever. At some point, this relationship comes to an end. How do we offboard these third parties when we are ending this relation, especially for third parties that hold critical data about our organization? How do we ensure that we wipe off all our data within their environment? So there must be a life cycle for contracting, onboarding, monitoring, and offboarding. And of course, this policy is driven by management because they set the tone at the top. It should be driven from the board down, or the board, depending on the structure of the organization. Different organizations have different structure. It should be driven from the highest level of the organization and cascaded down within the organization. Now, there should be ownership within the third party risk as part of the categorization. The usual matrix we use, someone should be responsible, someone should be accountable, some people can be consulted and informed. Now, what are the risk categories? They are operational risk that come as a result of third-party services. And this can be service delivery failures. For example, we are in the cloud, and for some reasons, our cloud environment is not reachable. Or we have a third-party application that we use to crunch critical data. And for some reasons, the applications become less operational. We can't use that. Someone should own this risk. There must be a person that owns this risk. Someone must be accountable. Also, there can be cybersecurity risk. There might be cybersecurity risk from third parties, data breaches like the one that happened in Jaguar, malware, ransomware. Somebody should have an oversight over it. Then also there could be compliance and there could be regulatory and non-compliance risk. For example, we might be using a critical third party or vendor that has some regulatory requirements. Probably they might be bound to conduct periodic PCI DSS or even more stringent government regulations. compliance regulations. And if they don't do that, most times when they have gone for so long in their journey of non-compliance, their names might be published or there might be news going on around them. And if our customers know that we are using third parties or we are employing the service of third parties that are not compliant, they begin to ask questions because the customers are becoming aware nowadays, especially for uh, personally identified data. So when these customers, when our customers begin to ask us questions, hey, we know you are procuring the service of this person, but it's everywhere in the news that they are not compliant. So what's going on? What happens to my data, or what happens to my information that you have stored with them? Someone must own this risk within the organization. Also, of course, financial. Some vendor might just go insolvent. Probably they've been badly managed. They have governance issues. And if these are vendors that manage our critical service, if they go under, how do we ensure that the risk that comes from our third party does not critically affect our position in providing services to our customers as part of our strategic objectives? So yeah, we looked at key concepts. We've defined third party risk. These are risks coming from third parties, external third parties that we have employed to provide services to us. Operational risk, these are risks that comes from we doing the business, risks that come from the business. There's cybersecurity risk, compliance risk, and reputational risk. So these are risks that can come from third parties. Now, what are the principles of effective third-party risk management? First thing is our approach to third-party risk management must be risk-based. We must really prioritize the vendors that provide critical services to us. The prioritization should start from the point of sourcing for these vendors. This prioritization should move into the onboarding, the monitoring, and the offboarding. What we find in practice is that most organizations, so if you say to most organizations during audit or review, give us a list of your vendors and third parties, you find that in their documentation, they've not even categorized, they've not classified their vendors, their third parties. So if you see that as a glance, that is a governance failure, because just looking at that sheet or the documentation that has been provided, that means the organization does not know who their critical vendors are. So that means they are not prioritizing risk management because they've not even classified from the word go. Also, there must be proper lifecycle management, like we had discussed earlier, from the point of sourcing all through offboarding. We must effectively manage this risk from start to finish. And we must be aware as organizations, or must be aware as cybersecurity professionals, that for third-party risk management, there's a shared responsibility. There's a shared responsibility for security. However, organizations that are employing the services of third-party or vendors cannot outsource accountability of risk. We cannot outsource accountability, because if anything, for example, the Jaguar case that was spoken about, Jaguar can't go to their customers and say, "Oh, we're not the one. Is the vendors that we have outsourced to that caused the breach." No, no, no. That is not a plausible. That is not a plausible thing to say. Our vendors, regulators, we hold organizations responsible. So organizations that are outsourcing, organizations that are subletting services are accountable. Sorry, the vendor can be responsible because, of course, the vendor has to provide some controls, access controls, incidents management, and the rest of them. But we as organizations that are onboarding or that are employing the services of vendors, we are responsible. Now, continuous monitoring. This is where there is always a lot of issues in managing third parties. So for most organizations, they do well at the point of onboarding. So at the point of onboarding, they have fantastic, at the point of sourcing and onboarding, they have fantastic processes. They vet the organization. Some even go as far as carrying out third-party cybersecurity audits on this vendor. Then the vendor is onboarded. Most times, because there's no proper classification of vendors, you find out that the continuous monitoring is not commensurate with the risk that the vendor pretends to the organization. What is expected in line with global best practices is that we classify our vendors and we monitor them based on the criticality of the services they render to us. And so again, for continuous monitoring, what we find in practice is because organizations want to pass certifications. So probably an organization wants to pass either SOC 2 audits or ISO 27001 audits, or EPA and the rest of PCIDS and the host of all these frameworks that organizations subscribe to, either for regulatory or for compliance reasons. We see third-party risk management as just ticking a box. So we know the auditor, when they come, they'll ask, okay, give us a list of your vendors. Then the auditor is now going to randomly select some 5-6 auditors and say, some 5-6 vendors and say, okay, for these 5-6 vendors, give me evidence of third-party risk assessment. So there's just a form somewhere we just download and we give to the vendor. We've ticked the box. We're compliant. But there's a difference between compliance and security. So most organizations, they just do this to tick the box, but they are not managing the risk. Some organizations are mature. They have their own forms where they give to their vendors based on criticality, and vendors fill out the form. Some organizations they just ask for certification. So if the vendor is ISO 27001 certified, give me your certificate, give me your statement of applicability. If the organization is SOC 2 Type 2 compliant, can you give me your SOC 2 Type 2 report? And they review that to see the controls that have been implemented. So different organizations have different ways in which they assess the risk. Some organizations, in their contract, they have a annual right to audit clause. Again, depending on criticality and depending on relationship, to go and audit the third party. But now the availability or the proliferation of SaaS services has even changed the game, because most organizations now is either for mid-sized to large organizations, is either they are in Azure cloud, GCP cloud, or AWS cloud. And the truth is, you can't send a questionnaire to Azure or send a questionnaire to AWS and say, okay, these are third-party risk management form. Can you please fill? Or you can't set up a meeting with AWS or Azure to say, okay, these are we want to conduct a third-party audit on you. What these organizations do, these large corporates, what they do, these large SaaS providers, what they do is that they have a trust service center or a compliance platform where they've uploaded their ISO compliance certificates, they've uploaded their SOC 2, they've uploaded EPA, they've uploaded PCI DSS. I mean, everything in the industries they serve, they have it. And based on relationship, if you have a relationship with them, they provide access for you to download these documents and review them. So again, this should not be about just downloading these documents for compliance purposes to pass tests and audits. We really need to read these documents and see the risk these providers, the risk that they have left unsolved that can affect us as an organization. Yeah, most times we can't say, okay, so if you look, for example, if you look at a large cloud service provider's SOC 2 report, and probably they have problems with access controls. We can't say because they have problems with access control, then okay, we are going to jettison them, we are going to change our provider. It might not work that way. But the idea with continuous monitoring and with third-party risk management is that we are aware as an organization that this is the risk that our large provider, our critical provider has left unsolved. We are aware and we see if we can have extra mitigants in our environment to cater for that risk. And also, as a part of continuous monitoring, what we see with most organizations is that the IT risk operational people do these assessments, but these assessments are kept in their files. These assessments don't go up to the highest decision-making level within the organization. As cybersecurity professionals, IT risk management managers, we are not risk owners, except for the risk in our domain. The business owners are the owners of the risk. And whenever we conduct this assessment, we should inform them these are our findings for them to make decisions. Also, we should ensure that we integrate risk management as an ongoing culture. It should be a culture, like we have said, not just for compliance purposes. Yeah. So for the third-party risk lifecycle, we should have a proper risk lifecycle for third parties. There should be onboarding and due diligence. We should have criteria, security criteria for onboarding vendors and third parties. We should have cyber security requirements for contracting, non-disclosure agreement, right to audit, and the rest of them. We must have ongoing monitoring and reviews. So what most organizations do is that probably for critical vendors, they review them once every year, twice every year. But for less critical vendors, it might be once every 2 years, depending. Again, all these decisions should come as a result of risk assessment. Then when we are ending the contract, how do we end the contract? How do we disengage? How do we get our data and our information off their platforms? That is something critical that we must put into consideration. So yeah, we spoke about this. What are the due diligence essentials? Some organizations have forms they share. Some want to see certifications, SOC 2, ISO, PCI DSS, AOC, and EPA, and the rest of them. Some organizations have detailed form, like we said, they have access control portions, they have incidents management, business continuity, and the likes. So basically, as part of our third-party risk management, we've said there should be governance and oversight. There should be roles and responsibility. We should tie it to risk, to policy. We should tie it to globally acceptable framework. And also there should be reporting and escalation. Again, we cannot overstress this. Our risk management should be tied to our incident response planning or incident response process, and as well as our business continuity process, because most times risk that emanate from third parties, they become incidents, and most times it might lead to us invoking our business continuity plan and our disaster recovery plan, and in some cases it even leads to crisis management. So we should tie these processes, and as much as possible we can include them in our tabletop incidents plan or tabletop incidents test to check, okay, if there is unavailability, or if we get malware, or if our system is shut down as a result of our critical third parties, how do we continue providing service, at least as a minimum level, to our customers? Now, what are the challenges in third-party risk management? First, our vendors have complex ecosystem. So most times you find out that you've outsourced to a vendor, your vendor have outsourced your services to other vendors. So we really want to know, we have contacted you to provide this service for us. Who are the fourth parties, because they're not fourth parties. Who are the fourth parties that you are outsourcing our jobs to? Because these fourth parties might have access to our data. How do these fourth parties that have access to our data, how are they secured? What governance, what cybersecurity controls do they have over our data or over our information assets that's in their care? Also, evolving regulations, like we said earlier, a lot of regulations, especially for organizations that are providing critical service, are being promulgated daily, and there's a lot of control. There's a lot of controls that are coming up, guiding organizations on how to manage risk coming from vendors and third parties. Then most times, some of the challenges we find is that really uh, the IT guys or the business has a strategic objective. The business want to meet the customer needs, so they need to procure something quickly. And most times, we need to balance speed and security. So most times, the risk manager is saying, okay, we have to conduct third-party risk assessment on this vendor. And business is telling you, no, 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 we have to move quickly. We have to procure this service. We have to onboard this vendor because we need to move to the market. We need to service our customers. There's a lot of money to be made very quickly. So there should be we need as organization, and this is driven majorly by governance, to balance the speed of onboarding and also ensuring security in onboarding. Yeah, so again, this alludes to what we said earlier. Best practices for a resilient TPRM program. There should be vendor classification. This cannot be overemphasized. What we don't classify, we can't monitor. And if we don't monitor, we can't improve. There should be a centralized framework. We should choose a globally acceptable framework to manage third-party risk. We should ensure, again, another thing we find in practice is that most times IT security or cyber security is informed later in the process of procurement. Probably the organization has chosen the vendor, they've already made up their mind about the vendor. And that is when they will start involving, or most times, from what you see in practice, most times the organization has even paid, management has paid the vendor, they've engaged the vendor, but they're just bringing IT risk managers or IT cybersecurity guys just to fulfill all righteousness. This should not be encouraged in any organization that has proper governance over third-party risk management. Then also there is a there's a place for employee training where employees should understand at a very high level the risk that our third party can bring to our organization and also their role in maintaining security. Employee training, they should be aware. Then, very importantly, we should integrate a culture of risk management. This is driven from the top. We should have a culture of security governance and inform everybody, at least at the operational level, that we have a shared responsibility to mitigate risk within the organization. Yeah, so emerging trends that are shaping TPRM, third-party risk management, cybersecurity chain. So there is a lot. You have a vendor, your vendor has another vendor, that vendor has another vendor, and your information or your data is flowing across several chains. Also, we are beginning, the use of AI has now blown open again the playing field, because most tools we have now are embedding AI into their services, and our data is going across the boundaries of where we think they are. Then also some organizations are now begin to, most of the tools we use for cyber security risk monitoring, most of the tools we use for risk assessment, most of the risk tools we use for IT risk management, they are having AI capabilities that are able to forecast, that are able to provide some level of threat intelligence, that can predict and monitor vendor risk more effectively. Then again, there's a lot of regulatory tightening, especially in the UK. There's the DORA for financial organization. There's NIS2 for organizations that are providing critical services to major sectors of the organization, and also for financial organizations, banks, fintechs. There's a lot of regulations that are really guiding how third-party risk and risk management is managed within the organization. So, in conclusion, we need to build a resilient future, because risk is not something that will never happen, it's a matter of when. And the first thing is, number one, it must be driven from the top. It should be governance driven from the top right down to the lowest level in the organization. There must be strong monitoring, which is based on classification. And also, we should have a culture of risk management. Third party risk management and risk management should not be to pass certifications or to pass audits. We should see it as something that will benefit the organization if it's done properly. And it provides, if done properly, it can be a business enabler and help us meet our strategic objective, because it can provide strategic advantage to us in the industry we operate in. So thank you very much for your time.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Appreciate your thoughts. Let me see. My video is not coming on. Okay, it's on. Thank you for your thought. And again, this kind of resonates. I experienced one where the third party is already connected to the network, and I only got to know when they asked us to approve something, and they said, go meet the cyber guys. They need to approve our connection, which is we can't access particular ports, and we need cyber security to approve it. And I said, come, what am I approving? Then let me look at it. And we then have to go back to the beginning. So one way, they say cybersecurity is or risk people are roadblockers, but you can't really afford to allow people to connect to your network when you have not done any form of due diligence. So thank you for sharing this thought with us this evening. And you can drop your question in the chat. I guess let me share my screen so that we can go to the other things I probably want Toluwani to address. So I haven't taken the presentation. I just wanted to share thoughts around as much information as possible, your journey in cybersecurity. How did you start that journey? Was it cyber from the beginning, or you had to make some transition from whatever role you were playing? Were there, like, your education also was a plus? You know, some people, they started off from non-sciences, some from maybe even education. That's what they studied. But some started from computer science or engineering, and so they entered into the field straight. What's it like for your journey into cybersecurity?
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. So I can classify myself as an accidental cybersecurity guy, if there's any word like that, because my bachelor's was in agriculture. Yeah, so my bachelor's was in agriculture. Never had a clue of anything computing except for using a laptop to watch movies and probably write my final year project. But then I'm someone uh, who has stood and is currently standing on the shoulders of giants. So I had a senior mentor who happens to be my father's friend, who was into IT audit. So when I graduated school, I met him and he just spoke to me about IT audit. He gave me the CSAM manual. You know how the CSAM manual is bulky. Then there was no online version. It was just that big book. And for some reasons, as I began reading that book, it was as if something drew me and attracted me. But then when I started out as an IT auditor, and I did not have any IT experience. Didn't know what ports were, didn't know what servers were, didn't know what firewalls were, didn't know anything about that. But then what I had to do was I had to work my way back. So the advice I will give is that different people, our journeys are different. Some people have studied computing. To get into cybersecurity might be easier because you understand what computing is all about. But for most of us that are in this journey, because even when I got into IT audit, the first set of people I work with were financial chartered accountants who, like me, were able to cram the system manual and pass the exam after multiple tries. So we were all in that challenge. We were thrown into the deep end. But what we had to do was to work our way back and start learning from the basic. And this is going to take a lot of hard work and diligence to go start. So when you begin to read and find out, then you begin to find the things that interest you. So for me, as I began to read about information technology, began to read about network, learn about databases and the rest of them. Clearly, I could see where my interest lies. I could see that for some of them, I needed this knowledge for my work. For this part, I was interested. And for some of us again that have the opportunity, we ventured into other certifications to help us. And we're having the work experience. So it's either two ways. If you can invest, again, is your career. If you can invest in certification and knowledge, not necessarily certification based, if you can invest in knowledge, please invest in knowledge. Some people are very privileged. They have the opportunity to work with less experience and they can learn on the field. But whatever it is, you need that knowledge to be able to do the job. So that was what I was doing, was heavily investing in knowledge. And at some point, I found out that I didn't want to be an information systems auditor. I really wanted to do cybersecurity because I found out that I was interested at first in red teaming. I did that for a while. I'm a person that gets bored very easily. At some point, I got bored of that. Then I moved on to application security. But the point is, as you keep going, you definitely will find your niche. But this comes as number one, meeting with people. You cannot rule that out. Identify one or two people that you really want to be like, or people that have gone ahead of you in this industry. If you can engage them, engage them. There are some pointers. You can make your journey shorter. Network with a lot of people, invest a lot in education, either paid education if you can. And thankfully, we're in 2025, there is a lot of free resources everywhere. Going on to YouTube, you would, if you are not careful, you will exhaust yourself with the amount of information you can get. And as we keep doing this, you find out that something would interest you. Then you can now choose to focus in that field or in that part of cybersecurity.
Thank you. I think this is very, very clear. Thank you for throwing more light into that conversation. And I believe that this is a kind of a hope to people who think they have a disadvantaged background in terms of, I am not, I don't have this experience from my first degrees. You can actually do anything with your interest. I have a friend who studied biochemistry, and he currently works in a very deep level database. So it's all about your interest and your ability to pursue that interest with action. There's a question in the chat that someone sent, I think it was directly to me, but this person is asking what technical skills are required. I guess what technical skills are required in cybersecurity, if I may add that.
Okay, so cybersecurity is vast. There's red teaming, there's application security, there's cloud security, there's governance, risk, and compliance. But at the basis, you can't adequately protect what you don't know. So you have a security company that's going to that is going to secure a fortress or a palace, and they don't even know the exit and the entries into the property, then how do they effectively secure it? So basically, you need a base knowledge of information technology. We are in the era of cloud computing now. For anybody that would succeed in providing assurance, cybersecurity assurance, at least you need to understand how the cloud works, how APIs work, how applications, network, and database, how they converge in the cloud. Also, understanding hybrid environments. When you understand that as a base, at least at for entry level um, interviews and the rest of them, you're able to show competence that you understand. Then, depending on where you choose to specialize, you need extra knowledge. For example, the knowledge someone who is doing red teaming needs is different from the knowledge somebody providing application security or somebody doing governance and risk management needs. So again, I would harp on general IT knowledge, knowing how things work. And you are not trying to know it to become an operator. You are reading and you are knowing wearing your risk management or when your compliance at. Because if you, for example, if you read about cloud environments, you see how clusters, how microservices are being provided. As an IT risk or cybersecurity person, what you're thinking is what can go wrong in this setup? Where can threats? What are the threats in this setup? And what are the vulnerabilities that can be exploited? So, as you are reading technology, you are reading it in the lenses of a risk manager, of a cybersecurity person, what can go wrong. But at the basis, again, I would say a general knowledge of technology, modern technology, and how it works is very important because you can't secure what you don't know.
Thank you. That's very, 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 very on point. I think that we have a lot of materials now. ISC2 gives you a general knowledge, and if you want to go the CompTIA route, there is a course in CompTIA that is, I think, is fundamental or foundation IT. I saw a video on YouTube. It's about 6 hours. If you are interested and you want to really maybe understand IT, just general knowledge, you can chat me. Again, if you're on this call, you probably got this invite through LinkedIn. You can ask me for the link on LinkedIn. I will share with you. It's a 6-hour video. Just a disclaimer, I have not gone through it completely, but I have watched it to some point, and I think that there's something that the facilitator something good that the facilitator is trying to communicate. And I have also gone through the outline of the course, and I know that the outline gives you an idea of every area of IT that you need to be familiar with. That knowledge is a starting point, especially if you haven't done anything in IT and you think you might be interested in cybersecurity. Let your passion be grounded on knowledge, because you can't be passionate about something and you don't have that knowledge. And IT, as Toluwani has said, is a bedrock, is a foundation for which cybersecurity is standing. I think there's no other question in the chat, and I want to thank Toluwani for honoring our invite. I know it's 1 hour I said, but we have gone past 1 hour now. And I want to just challenge everyone on the call. And if you think about it, especially for people who are thinking, I want to do cyber, and they are bothered about where should they focus on, where is the area? And one of the questions here, or the question in my chat, was talking about technical skills. There are conversation around we don't need technical skills for some areas in cybersecurity. I kind of have a different opinion. You need that technical knowledge to be able to govern that space. You can't govern what you don't understand. And so don't let it be like, the way people run away from mathematics and say, sorry, Toluwani, your hand is up. You want to make some contribution?
Yes, please. So I'd like to speak about what you just.
Yeah,
So
please go ahead.
there's always this conversation, and you see it if you're on LinkedIn, it's one of the major fights that go on. Yeah, you need technical skills. You don't need technical skills. You need so we need to always put this thing in context. What the conversation should be the level of the technical skills you need. Let's bear it in mind. You can, so if you are specializing in database audit or application audit, you might not be as skilled as the guy who writes Python every day. That is not possible. But then at least you should be skilled enough to be able to understand the workings. So, for example, if I'm going to review, let's say AWS, for example, cloud audit, I should, at a minimum, as a cybersecurity assessor, know the services that are available on AWS and how they connect. What you don't want to do, and part of the mistakes I made early in my career, is that you don't want to go to the field and start asking some questions that make you look like you don't know what you're doing. IT guys they will make a mincemeat of you. So for these technical skills, you might not be as deep as the people who are operational every day, but you need to know how they work. You need to be able to understand them at least at some level for you to ask intelligent questions and for you to spot risk. But again, you cannot be as technical as those who do it day in and day out. Thank you.
So much. One of the facilitator we invited, what he said, which encapsulates what you mentioned, was that you may be less technical in some roles, but you can't say you don't need technical skills. You need technical skills in cyber, but you may be less technical in dealing with some element of technical areas in cyber. So if you have been thinking on how do I start, and my encouragement is this, right? Is that action, a lot of people believe that you need some level of clarity before you take action. Like, you need to know where you're going before you take action. I'm kind of, reversing that hypothesis or proposition, especially when you have decided that cyber is what you want to do. Once you make that decision that you want to go into cyber, what you need to do is to take action. And why is this important? You cannot understand where you should go in cyber if you are standing outside. You first need to come into cyber and then take actions on the basics. Even IT, by the time you read IT, you will know which area of IT you are more interested in. So if you have been contemplating on cyber for a long time, I think it is enough. What you need right now is to take action. And there's a lot of materials online on YouTube that you can put your action in to bring about that clarity. If you don't take action in cyber, it is unlikely that you will have the clarity to know whether your area is red teaming, as Toluwani said. And by the way, red teamings are the likes of people that are offensive. They work in the space of finding things out, finding vulnerabilities out, finding weaknesses. So they are red teaming. They are blue teaming, which is defenders. They protect system from attackers. So whether you want to be an attacker, you can't find out if you don't start that journey. Whether you prefer to be the one that would defend the organization, you have to start that journey. And so my challenge to you today is that action will bring clarity. and your action is to start that journey. If it is ISC2 you want to start with, by the time you read the 5 domains in ISC2, you will find something that will interest you in ISC2, and that will bring you the clarity that you need. Stop asking for where do I want to be in cyber. I want to do start that journey, because time really is not our friends. And if you know, in cyber, things change almost as frequent as our breathing. Things are changing, and the more time you take before you start that journey, the more you are leaving to go and cover ahead. So I encourage you to start that journey. Sign up for a course. Go on YouTube, look for something about foundation in IT or foundation cybersecurity. 2 months ago, last month, we completed our beginner cybersecurity mentoring program. We should come back by next year to do another, but there's enough materials online that you can glean from and start your journey. And you can start without a laptop. So if once you have a phone, you can once you have a phone and you have access to YouTube, that's the beginning. I know that at some point you will need a laptop because you will need to maybe practice some lab. But the first thing you need is the access to information, that you already have access to the internet, and YouTube provides you enough materials to consume. If you decide to spend an hour on YouTube looking for cybersecurity material, that's a good starting point. And by the time you read it and you like it, there will be a way for you to get to the next step. I hope this helps everyone on the call, and I thank you for joining us today. And thank you so much, Toluwani, for sharing your thought with us. Today, we have completed the 19th edition of 2025 Cybersecurity Mentoring Group. Our next session is October 4th. And as I said, if you indeed have a lady that you think we can learn from, please send me a chat. I will be glad to connect with them so that I can bring them up to share their own perspective on the journey. And I hope that you've taken something from tonight. And Toluwani is on LinkedIn. In case you have more questions to engage, please reach out to Toluwani, and hope to see you again on October 4th. And for now, bye from my end here. Thank you so much, Toluwani.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.